or what was the main idea that I discussed yesterday? She says I talked about Tarai.
Whatever we did in the past in the name of development, that has got negative effects.
You are not with me. Somehow I feel that when I am talking, when I am analyzing, you are not present here. Otherwise, yesterday's topic should at least be remembered until today. It is less than 24 hours that we talked. What was the topic yesterday?
Winter.
The topic yesterday was winter rains. And that something has happened which has disturbed the winter rains. But I said something very critical or something very significant and important about winter rains. And what was that? Winter rains was the topic, and then I made some observation, some very critical observation. What was that?
It is related to moisture or surface moisture and for the production.
It is related to that, yes, that's all. But about winter rains, I made some very key observation.
It is related, connected to the monsoon.
Tarai, of course, yes, you will see.
That it is linked to the monsoon, that if it's not happening right, then monsoon will get affected.
Yes, more or less, is quite close to it. I said that winter rains of India, of northern India, are the key to Indian climate, are the key to Indian monsoon. Now something, when I make these very striking statements, they should at least strike you. I'm not making an ordinary statement when I say that if winter rains are disturbed and winter rains hold the key to Indian monsoon, somewhere such key statements must register. If they don't register and you are not doing any homework also, in any case, today we come to our last lecture on this, or last discussion meeting on this landscape business. Of course, we will meet for two more meetings in which we will exchange some stories and talk about theory of landscaping. But as far as India, the landscape is concerned, we will complete the task today, howsoever complete or incomplete it is. Okay. Winter rains are the key to Indian monsoon. And what does Indian monsoon do? What is the significance of Indian monsoon for this world? Been talking about it from the beginning. Practically every day I have said something about that. That Indian monsoon is not only important for India.
It covers a large area. Not
Very, very large area. It is the key to climate in the entire Southeast Asia, Far East. far west, not far west, but West Asia, also his continent Africa. I mean, it is the monsoon which causes a large number of trade winds and atmospheric conditions, climatic conditions. It is responsible for a very, very large part of India, world. And the most thickly populated part of the world. When we say that Indian monsoon affects half the world population at least, very directly, very effectively, it means that it is not important only for us, it is also very important for the rest of the world also. When I started talking, some people thought that I am raising some patriotic issue. So let me make it very clear that I am not a patriotic kind of person, not at all. And that's what I want to ask you today. I mentioned that some very eminent scientist of India has been talking, very, very eminent. Did you try to find out that not a drop should be allowed to go to the seas? Why should so much water be wasted to go to the seas? Did you care to find out? And I very emphatically said that I will not name the person because he is a very eminent person.
Yeah, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
But what? Nobody else tried to. Nobody thought that such a startling statement should be inquired, should be found out. No. He has taken one name. Is he correct? Nobody knows. How many people have you heard saying this? Or are you aware of this fact that scientists say that no water should be allowed to flow into the seas? You are not aware of this fact also. Why are we building dams? Are we building large dams?
For irrigation purpose.
For irrigation purpose and electricity also. And when we use the whole water, what will happen? We are trying to use the entire water that flows into the seas. What will ultimately happen? If suppose these scientists and engineers and others,
The water cycle goes down and the salinity of sea increases, so the biodiversity of the sea is also disturbed.
that will be disturbed. Many disturbances will take place, large. When you study it, you will find the implications. If you ever care to study these issues, then you will find that it will mean a disaster. And disaster not only for India, but for a very large world. Now, equally important person, more important person, a very great statesman of India said that these dams are temples of today, temples of tomorrow. Have you heard of it? Huh? Jawaharlal Nehru. So you can well appreciate that I am not a very patriotic person. I am a very critical person who does not hesitate in criticizing the most eminent statesman of this country and equally eminent scientist of this country.
Sir, is there any dam which diverts all the water that comes into doesn't allow anything to go back?
You see, now Ganga is almost an obstruct, dead river. Most rivers are dead now. India's river systems are practically dead. Very little water is flowing into the sea, not even 20-30%. It is being wasted, and not only wasted, it is heavily polluted. So that's why lots of disasters are also taking place. There is some relationship. Nobody is bothered to find out about it. But let us come back to where we left yesterday, or where we tried to start today. that winter monsoon is the key to Indian monsoon. Now why am I saying that? What is your guess? You don't have to guess. If you have carefully, if you were even attentive in these lectures, you would know that what is the basis of the monsoon? How does monsoon arise? We did talk about it. Why should winds from the high seas set in to enter Indian continent, Indian subcontinent? Where does this large difference occur? Where are these winds going? Who is attracting these winds? Of course, I heard about Himalaya there, of course Himalaya, but what Himalaya? Himalaya is a very large thing. The largest monument in the world, largest natural monument on this globe is Himalayas. Huh? Northeast Himalaya. Very depressed. I'm laughing, but I feel literally dejected and, completely frustrated. Why should the winds rise so heavily that it should cause a monsoon which is spread over not only all India but which is spread over Southeast Asia, which covers the whole of China? Huh? Tibet Plateau. Tibetan Plateau. The entire glacier, Tibetan Plateau is the main cause, but the whole range of glaciers. Now what happens in this whole range of glaciers? Pardon? Conducting heat. Conducting heat that is generated in the glaciers creates a large space because that heat, the atmosphere is enlarged and space is created, and these cool airs from the sea setting towards the Himalayas. That's why they are called southwesterlies. Their original direction is from south to west. Okay. Now, what is the relationship between winter rains and the glaciers? What is the main problem? Have you heard of global warming?
Yes.
Have you heard of the fact that glaciers are receding? Now, why are glaciers receding? Why are you sitting so far away, friends? Come closer. Let me have a look at your faces. Come. There are a number of seats here. This side, on side. Come in front. Don't sit that far away.
The front row.
Let it not become a public address meeting, yeah? Let it be a classroom. Why are glaciers receding?
Without the winter rains coming in the loop.
And low entering, that is one thing. And what winter rains do for glaciers?
Does not let the entry of
That was Tarai. Somebody is saying, come here. Come closer. What is this? There are chairs here. then what happens? See, if winter rains are erratic, are not timely, then what happens into the Himalayas? Immediately below the Himalayas, the plains are immediately below the Himalayas. In fact, Indo-Gangetic plains are also part of the Himalayas. The land is formed by the drainage. But when winter rains do not take place, do not occur timely or in sufficient quantity, what happens to the Himalayas? Temperatures do not cool down sufficiently. And when temperatures do not cool down sufficiently, there are no rains in the Himalayas also. The lower parts of Himalayas and middle parts of middle Himalayas also need some amount of winter rain. What gets converted into snow? What is the element in snow? Snow is made of what? Water. And water is there in atmosphere in what way? Moisture. So what is the relationship when winter monsoon, winter rains are not there sufficiently? What happens? No rains in the Himalayas, lessening of moisture regimes in the Himalayas, and if there are not sufficient moisture regimes, I had told you this word that it's one of the key words, moisture regimes. Moisture, how do you spell it? If moisture regimes are disturbed or they are not sufficiently strong enough, naturally precipitation of snow is affected. There is a very important question which our scientists, meteorologists and other important people who should be concerned about these things do not care to ask. I generally ask. I am asking you also. We have been talking about this now for 10 lectures or perhaps more than 10 lectures. I think we have met here for 12 lectures. My question to you is, what is your estimate of an annual snowfall, of an annual snow precipitation in the Himalayas? What is the amount? Any guesswork?
50
I'm talking about the quantity, total quantity of snow precipitation in the Himalayas. Tell me in tons, million tons, billion tons, trillion tons, any guess?
It is 1/3 of 1/10 of the volume of Hindu Mahasagar. It's supposed to be, yeah, it's about to 1/10 of the total volume of Hindu Mahasagar.
Whatever water amount is there in the Indian Ocean, and 1/10 of that. Where did you get the data?
Sir, I suppose this is data estimate.
This is the supposition. I am asking. Try to guess. I will welcome any guess. He said it is 1/10 of the. If I were to ask him how much water is there in the Indian Ocean, again he would not know how much water is there in the Indian Ocean.
Sir, it is 1/5 or 1/7 of Pradhan Mahasagar.
That is the, we need not laugh at him. We can laugh at our scientists and we can laugh about this science. This science, this entire knowledge of science cannot estimate, cannot guesstimate, does not even have this question before them. They don't know. There is so much talk going on about global warming, this, that, something should be done, this, carbon credit should come, that carbon credit should go. I don't know, there are international conferences, all kinds of people are giving Padma Shris and Nobels and whatnot about this. This simple question, that what has been the effect of all this on snow precipitation in the Himalayas, or what is the amount of snow precipitation in the Himalayas, is an unknown fact. You can ask, there is a center in this IIT Delhi which is called Center for Atmospheric Sciences, and eminent leading scientists are sitting there, paid very, very high salaries. They are professor emeritus. Maybe half a dozen professor emeritus are there, based there. They are not willing to read a paper. They are not open to come and discuss these issues. That is the state of science. Atmospheric sciences. Other sciences also are not in a very better shape, but that is the situation. Nobody knows how much amount of snow is needed in this large area, and what is the total area covered by glaciers. And these glaciers are responsible for water, for watering half the mankind or more than half the mankind. I have explained that to you. All regions that are affected by these glaciers. There is absolutely no guesstimate available. Nobody knows how much amount. Why? If people start asking real questions in science, most of science will disappear. Science will not hold for a day. If we start asking genuine questions, if we learn to ask proper questions that science should be asking, there will be no science left in this world. Because then they will come to realize that it is, at least next 100 years, we would not know what is the amount of snow precipitation in the Himalayas. Or developing that kind of instrumentation which can measure it will take very, very long time. Perhaps it would never be possible. That is not the question. The more important question is to find out this billion or trillion tons of ice, snow that precipitates every year into the Himalayas, where does it draw its moisture? They just now talked that snow needs moisture. Without moisture there cannot be snow. Pardon? From the sea. How can it get from the sea? Dry air is coming from this side, enters the Himalayas. Some amount of it can come, of course, come from the atmosphere. Nobody knows how much of it comes from the atmosphere, or how we should find out how much atmosphere moisture is available, and rest of the moisture. Precipitation cannot take place from the atmospheric conditions. There have to be some global conditions, some conditions on this earth to begin the precipitation. First transformation, the basis of first transformation is the rains in the plains. Indo-Gangetic plain rains, winter rains, are the basic cause. You know, what do you call it in science? Setting the, you take one brick and all the bricks will fall, one after the other. Step. Whatever it is. See, like this. And there is a there is a series of processes. First thing that should happen is the winter rains. And if winter rains are disturbed, nobody is disturbed. Because nobody wants to ask these hard questions. These are difficult questions to answer. It is not easy to find out. But whatever could be found out, whatever should be at least known, is also nobody is bothered about. And then scientists say that not a drop of water should flow into the seas. And that is our elder statesmen also. It is not only scientists. Our most eminent leaders also believe that. Now I want you to compare that eminent scientist, whosoever he is, and the Buddha who talked to me. Who is a better person? Who is a good citizen? The scientist or that Buddha, that illiterate Buddha, that illiterate old woman? Which old woman I am talking about?
You asked the
You said, why are you closing the tap? Why are you stopping the water from flowing in the Himalayas? Also compare it with this fact that national citizenship is more important or global citizenship is more important. Who is the greater global citizen? The old woman or the scientist? Or an eminent statesman, you all named him? One of the most important builders of modern India. Because of whom our 80% river system is dead. You can go to any river, anywhere in the country, you will find that river system is practically dead. Highly polluted and completely or near completely obstructed. And questions that need to be asked, nobody is asking them. So the question is that vernacular wisdom is there. We have the model of old woman who has not gone to any school, who perhaps cannot sign her name, who doesn't know any alphabet, who has to spend half her day collecting firewood so that fire in the house can be lit and people can have some hot water and some hot food, or food can be cooked. She says that if you will stop the tap here, if you will not let the water flow in the Himalayas, what will happen to the fish in the Ganga Sagar? She does not know the geography of our Gangetic or Brahmaputra deltas. She says Ganga Sagar. She has heard of Ganga Sagar. Perhaps Aziz can tell you more about Ganga Sagar. I have not also been there, but I have also heard about Ganga Sagar. And she says, what will happen to the fish? What will happen to the birds? And what will happen to the peoples who live along these streams that flow out of Himalayas? And there are others who say, not a drop should be allowed to flow. Nobody is bothered that winter rains have been obstructed, winter rains have become eccentric, winter rains are not there, snow is not precipitating as it used to precipitate, snow is not holding, and every year if you see the IMD predictions and you see the actual rainfall and actual rain precipitation in this country, you will find that they are most of the time they are not able to do any estimation. There has been a serious debate in this country that Indian Meteorological Department should be closed down because it is of no service. But why have we allowed to continue it? Any idea?
Because in the country there has to be a meteorologist.
No, there has to be some more valid reason. Of course, that is true. What you have said is practically true. You see, aviation industry insists that there should be a center which can predict, which can tell, which can guide about changes or immediate occurrences in the meteorology, in the atmospheric range, what is happening, because aviation industry, it's a must for aviation industry, we still have that department. Otherwise, there has been very serious debate in this country, and many people have agreed that yes, there is no need for an Indian meteorological study center, because it cannot be studied, because nobody has cared to develop that science on the basis of which something can be found. And whatever science people had generated, what I call vernacular wisdom, for that there is no concern. There is nobody is bothered about. Vernacular is a dirty word. Vernacular is not a respectable word. So, landscape, India landscape is a one integrated whole. How many political divisions are there in this India landscape? Have you heard of SAARC? Yes. What is SAARC? South Asian Regional Cooperation, etc. Now, what are these SAARC? What is this SAARC? Group of nations? One at a time, and a little loudly. Yes.
Group of eight Asian nations.
8 Asian nations. So this geographical entity, this geographical unity, this geographical integrity, which is the key words for which is the Himalayan glaciers and the Indian Ocean and the relationship of monsoon. This integrity creates an area which is called Hindustan, which is called South Asia, which is called the India. So this, and it is divided into eight political countries or whatever number it is there. You can find out. Nepal is there, Bhutan is there. Bhutan is of course still independent. Tibet of course has been grabbed by China, occupied by China. Afghanistan is there, Pakistan is there, and Burma is there. This is all South Asia. This is one, and this is one entity, because this monsoon which rises here in the ocean moves like this and moves like this and covers this. So this is one integrity. But whatever escapes is for others. So basic issue is that not only Indians but the whole world should be concerned about the India's climate, India's biospheres, their interrelationship. I've been talking of 50 biospheres. Anyone tried to find out what are these 50 biospheres in India? It is not necessary. Something has been said, well, why should we care? Why should we bother about it? At least try to find out what are these biospheres. How many habitats are there? We didn't discuss about the multiplicity of habitats. Name some habitats, whichever habitats you can think of. Pardon? Habitat has to belong to some living creature, some bio.
Gir forest.
Huh?
Gir forest.
Gir is a gir. Yes, gir habitat would be a habitat. Yes, gir lion. That is a lion habitat. We have tiger habitat. We have elephant. We have at least 2 or 3 or 4 elephant habitats. How many elephant habitats are there? Of how many have you heard? Can you suggest to me where elephants are found? Kerala? Don't say Kerala, say Mysore. Mysore and Kerala, little. Kerala is little part of it. Kerala is on the other side of the west coast. So, Pathar ke udhar आपकी कम is on this eastern side of the western coast. And Kerala is not there on the eastern side of the west coast. So, yes, that is there. Kaziranga is there. Then this Rajaji Park. Where is Rajaji Park? It is quite close to Delhi. Between Dehradun, between the Garhwal, foothills of Garhwal is Rajaji Park. Garhwal hills are there, and foothills of Garhwal hill is the area denoted as between Rishikesh, Srinagar, and Dehradun. That area is also elephant area. Like that, if you start looking into it, if you start taking interest, you can find out that you can still define IIT location as some habitat, and lots of peacock are there. If you are awake, or if you are aware, or if you are at least your ears are sensitive enough, they are calling it almost all kinds of people. Like that, there are different habitats. There may be several hundred habitats. But basic thing that you must find out is what are these 50 biospheres and how are they interrelated. Yesterday we talked of one relationship about the Tarai, which is a curtain. Tarai is a curtain. It's a complete forest. It's a rainforest. It's a thick forest, and it functioned as a curtain. And our forefathers considered it to be very sacred. They set up very many temples there so that nobody would cut any wood from that part. And only natural grazing would take place and some natural felling. So that was protecting the glaciers in a very big way. Like that, there are all these 50 biospheres that are there in India are very deeply interrelated. Talking about or saying that we will take water from the wet half to the dry half is not a very sensible thing, because it will disturb the movement of atmospheric winds, and if that is disturbed, monsoon will be disturbed very largely. It is not something very wise to replace God. And science has given this arrogance to man that perhaps we can replace God, whatever. See, we make a room like this where there should be no ventilation, and then we invent this air conditioner to sit here for an hour a little comfortably. So all this kind of thing is that is the business of science. Science is surviving on this business. And there is another factor on which science survives. Can you tell me what? What is science and technology surviving on? You invent anything. These machines have become very popular, these laptops and PCs. What is the very significant feature of this technology, information technology or whatever you call it? I am not very much aware.
All the materials are derived from nature itself.
Comfort.
Every time a new PC, a new computer is discovered, a recent invention comes, discovery comes, it becomes obsolete, something new has to come tomorrow. Its obsolescence is the important thing. It becomes obsolete the moment it is invented. And that is what science and technology survives on. If it doesn't become obsolete, at any point of time, science would crumble. खत्म हो जाएगा. गुब्बारा फट जाएगा, balloon will be blown up, there will be no jobs. If the idea of obsolescence is taken away from science, any invention must become obsolete, start becoming obsolete from the moment it is discovered, from the moment it is put together. And this is a major example that you have what generation it is, 10th, 12th?
Sir, in computer it's a 6th generation.
हाँ?
Sir, in computer it's a 6th generation.
6th?
Yeah, not 9th.
पर इसके बाद कंप्यूटर में इसके बाद तो 4 जनरेशन और आ गई होंगी. There must be 4-5 more generations
Sir,
after
the
this.
program will be changed, but generation is not changed right now.
No, change. Generation is also changing. It is 10th or 11th generation now we have in computer systems, in information technology, and the last 5, 6, 7, 10 generations are completely. Somebody sent me a laptop about 10 years ago. It was costing about 1,15,000 rupees in United States. It came as a gift. Somebody wanted to buy it from me after it was used for 2, 3, 4 years for 75 rupees, 75,000 rupees. And I said, what? Why should I sell it for 75,000 rupees? And in 2 years, it became what? 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. And it is obsolete now. All my work and data, my friends are struggling to extract it from these old computers, don't know what to do, how to print it out or how to save it. It's a major problem because last 10, 12 years, whatever work I had done was fed into these laptops or PCs, and now it is becoming very difficult to extract it. So obsolescence is the basis of this science. That's why those who have completed their Viva, it is being asked that have you cared to look into that book 500 years? You should at least be aware of what are the current debates, what are the challenges before mankind. If this trend, that anything, a Frigidaire, a air conditioner, a motor car, if it has to change every day, what kind of drain it is on the resources? How long this kind of drain on the resources can be sustained? Will science start thinking in terms of stability or not? A lot of you have been using that phrase, sustainable development. What does it mean, sustainable development? Is it, why it is not becoming an issue of scientific debate, of science discourse? So all these questions are there. We discussed this idea of landscape with you to explain to you in very concrete terms that what is our landscape, what is our habitat, how it is created, how it is generated, how it is surviving, what is the organic methodology by which it replenishes itself. So it is for all these issues, it is just an elementary discussion that we have had. But if there are any issues, somebody yesterday asked me about, somebody asked me that how is atmosphere purifying, how does atmosphere get purified by the flowing rivers from the Himalayas? So think about it a little bit. We will meet for 2 more meetings. In that we will discuss all these, whatever questions you are able to raise or whatever questions you are able to find in now between today and next Monday. So next Monday and Tuesday we will discuss these issues and anything about today's lecture, any issue, any problem.
Sir, I think that dam is not a major problem. I think management of dam is a Major problem we can correlated it with like a flow of water or flow of money.
This is an old debate. Long ago, I didn't narrate to you this story, but now that you have known, you know what Jawaharlal has said. See, Jawaharlal was our Prime Minister for a very long period, longest period. He was our Prime Minister, and he was very fond of, lecturing like me, as I'm all the time raising things or trying to distribute wisdom or trying to correct it. And he was also a very wise man. He was writing to all the chief ministers in India every week a letter. And in one of these letters he said that our task is not difficult because West is doing everything and we simply have to learn from them, copy it and repeat it here and duplicate it here. So one chief minister whom I knew very closely, very intimately, told me this story. He said he was very unhappy with this letter. So he wrote back to Jawaharlal ji. He said, Jawaharlal ji, what you have advised is very good, but West is making large number of mistakes. What will we do? Jawaharlal wrote back next week, when they correct their mistakes, we will also correct our mistakes. This is based on the assumption that whatever mistake science is doing, science is capable of correcting them. This idea emanates from there that there is nothing wrong with damming. Damming is all right. We need electricity. Management is not correct. Show me one dam in the world, in the United States, in anywhere else, in Soviet Russia or in Russia, anywhere, which has not killed the river. The issue is life of the river or dam. You want your river system or not? We want you in this course to set you thinking about these issues that how should we at least begin thinking on these fundamental issues. The problem is Kharagpur was the first IIT campus. If you visit it, you will find it that it is very old, it is all very badly designed, this, that. Next is Delhi. Just go into the corridors, see what is happening. How many cases of dengue are there in this campus today?
Lots of.
Why should an IIT campus have dengue? And authorities are not even bothered. Nobody is concerned about it. That these students who are spending thousands and thousands of rupees, their parents have sent them here not to get contaminated by dengue, but to learn some science and technology. They get contaminated by dengue.